maybe we'll start with Franz Wright, whom I just mentioned. Franz was a friend of mine who passed away, wow, 9 years ago. Hard to believe. I still have his last voicemail on my phone. It doesn't seem like 9 years. In any case, so Franz is the son of James Wright, who won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry. Franz also won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry for his book, Walking to Martha's Vineyard, which was published in 2003 or 4. They're the only father and son that have done that. And Franz, from a very early age, struggled mightily with manic depression, as his father had. He also struggled with drug addiction. He was homeless for periods of time. And in the 90s, he met a lady named Elizabeth Elkers out in Arkansas, where Franz was teaching at the time. And they got married, and Franz converted to Catholicism and cleaned up and started writing the best poems of his life.
Wow.
And these start appearing in a book called The Before Life, which is an Englishing of Charles Baudelaire's poem La Vie Intérieure. And the poem that I want to read from Franz is from that book, The Before Life. It's called Memoir. Just hope he forgot the address and don't answer the phone for a week. Put out all the lights in the house. Behave like you aren't there. If some night, when it's blizzarding, you see Franz Wright arrive on your street with his suitcase of codeine pills, lugging that heavy black manuscript of blank texts. So, in some ways, this poem can be hard. It can be hard for me to read his poems. So I'll be brief about this, I think. Here, the key image is the manuscript of blank texts. You say, well, what is this? First, that's a paradox, a blank text, right? Either there's text or the page is blank. The
Right.
idea here, there's no text, it's blank. It's just white space, like the blizzard that's outside. There's nothing there. What is this manuscript? Well, the title of the poem gives it to us. Memoir. That's his memoir. His memoir is an empty book. There's nothing in it. Why is there nothing in it? Because he's driven everyone away from him. He's pushed people away. And precisely that's what's happening in this poem, pointing at the cyclical nature of this isolation, which is tied to addiction, as he mentions the codeine pills. He's pushed everyone away. And so the mood of the sentences is imperative, right? Not indicative, not interrogative. It's imperative. Just hope he forgot the address and don't answer the phone for a week. Put out all the lights in the house. Behave like you aren't there. He's telling everyone to ignore him. And he's not just anyone, but it's his friends, people whose addresses he knows.
Right.
He's pushing them away, telling them to ignore him if he should reach out. And so we see this poem getting deep into the psyche of the addict that pushes people away.
Right.
And the echo of the blank texts and the image of the blizzarding, the way that he uses himself in the third person, right? We see this distancing of the self that often happens in addicts who are one person when they're sober and one person when they're not. It's just beautifully rendered. It's very powerfully rendered. And
Right. Yeah, I was thinking about the blizzard image of the echoing the white paper and the isolation of this figure walking through the blizzard surrounded by nothing but just blankness, you know.
Yeah, and that's a thing that, that Franz lived through. And what's remarkable is being able to turn that pain into a work of art that transcends his personal limitations, that gets at this thing that's very common of this isolation. One of the last things that I remember him saying to me is, on the phone is he said, I miss my guys, because his guys were either dead or he pushed everybody away. So pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah. But there's some beautiful poems by him in the collection of, more redemptive poems as well. And,
Yes.
Poems involving, one set right before his conversion, I guess. I don't know the exact timeline, but that's what it seemed like. So some beautiful, uplifting stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Franz is a poet who explored inner darkness in a way that's reminiscent of Charles Baudelaire, whom he thought was the greatest of all French poets, or of Arthur Rimbaud. But he also came out of it to some extent. And one of my favorite passages in the first poem of the book that won the Pulitzer, called Walking to Martha's Vineyard, the poem is called Year One. And the last 3 lines, it's, I think, the best line break in English. He addresses God. He says, proof of your existence, there is nothing, line break, but. There is nothing but.
Yeah.
Beautiful discovery. So yes, not everything is doom and gloom, but Franz was not afraid of the darkness, and it's important that we face it.
You included his poem about Baudelaire in there, and that was interesting too because we've talked about Baudelaire a little bit before, but actually, now that I think of it, it makes me think of your Orpheus poem, right? Because he is, even though he's a fan of Baudelaire as a poet, he's sort of tearing down some of the self mythology or the self image of Baudelaire. And he says, there's some line in there, something like evil is basically like a mask for misery to try to make your misery more interesting. So, something like that,
right.
Paraphrasing, but
yeah,
that was very interesting.
And Baudelaire, as with, I think many people, turn to evil precisely for that reason, that there's what seems like a death wish, but it's not really a wish to die. It's a wish to live more fully. Living is a far cry from just breathing. And it's this desire for life and feeling hemmed in and trapped. And people sort of twisting around, not knowing what to do, they'll act out and go toward evil as a way to try to feel alive. And it results in, phrase that Franz uses in that poem is a dark glamour, that we tend to sort of be fascinated by those who really commit to evil. There is this dark glamour. There's this mystery. Milton's onto it, and that's why his Satan is so interesting in Paradise Lost.
I like how there's a way to sort of deflate that as well, to like recognize that and deflate it. And I think that's an important step. We can't just like stop with like, oh, evil's so fascinating, but we shouldn't go there. They actually have to deflate the pretense of it as well, which I think it's admirable that, given his admiration for Baudelaire as a poet, he was able to do that in that poem.